The grand chamber of the galactic sovereignty stretched across 17 kilometers of floating crystal platforms, suspended in the burning heart of a dying star. 12,000 species had gathered here across 9,000 years to witness the judgment of new civilizations. Representatives from every corner of the known universe filled the ascending tiers that disappeared into the amber haze above. Some had tentacles. Others had wings of pure light. Many existed as clouds of sentient gas or colonies of microscopic organisms working as one mind. None of them had ever seen what was about to happen. Admiral James Harker stood at the center of the presentation platform, a disk of polished black stone no wider than 6 meters. The heat shields of his environmental suit flickered with each solar flare that licked against the chamber's protective barriers. Behind him, 3 other humans waited in perfect stillness. Commander Elena Vasquez, Lieutenant David Stone, Ambassador Ruth Palmer. 4 humans. 4 representatives of a species that had only achieved interstellar travel 40 years ago. 4 humans facing the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. The laughter had started 8 minutes ago. It had not stopped. High Arbiter Thistleon, a being made of interwoven threads of light and crystal, raised what served as its hand to quiet the assembly. The gesture took nearly a full minute to register across the vast acoustic space of the chamber. Ambassador Palmer of the Human Collective. Thistleon's voice resonated through 17 different translation frequencies at once. Each word carried undertones of poorly hidden amusement. You petition the galactic sovereignty for recognition as a spacefaring species. Yet your submissions indicate your vessels cannot exceed 3% of standard light velocity. Your species has not mastered gravitational manipulation. Your weapons systems rely on kinetic acceleration. The word kinetic drew a fresh wave of laughter from the Veldrothi delegation. Their bioluminescent bodies pulsed in patterns of mockery that needed no translation. Ruth Palmer did not flinch. Her gray eyes swept across the assembly with an expression the aliens could not read. Humans had evolved something unique over their violent history. Patience born of rage. The ability to smile while planning destruction. High Arbiter, Palmer spoke, her voice steady and clear. The human species does not petition for recognition. We are here to inform you that we exist. The difference may seem small to your sovereignty. I assure you it is not. The laughter died in scattered pockets. Confused murmuring replaced it. Thistleon's light threads flickered in what passed for a frown. You misunderstand your position, Ambassador. The galactic sovereignty has governed these stars for 40,000 cycles. We have elevated species. We have guided them. When necessary, we have corrected them. Your chemical burning vessels crossed into sovereignty space without permission. This is not a negotiation. This is a sentencing. From the upper tiers, a massive figure descended on anti-gravity platforms. General Vornak of the Veshan War Ministry stood 12 meters tall. Living armor had been grown over his body across 6 centuries of conquest. His species had served as the sovereignty's enforcement arm for 3,000 years. They had never lost a military engagement. I have reviewed the human fleet specifications, Vornak rumbled. His voice sounded like grinding stone. 3 vessels. Combined crew of 4,000. No shield systems. No dimensional fold capability. Their most powerful weapon is a magnetically accelerated projectile system with a maximum yield equivalent to a standard Bishan sidearm. He paused to let the implications settle across the chamber. High Arbiter, I recommend we not waste judicial resources. Simply redirect one of our mining drones to their home system. The matter can be resolved. Within a single rotation, the chamber erupted in approval, foot stomping, tentacle slapping, harmonic, vibrations from species that communicated through sound. Waves. Admiral Harker remained still. Behind him, Commander Vasquez whispered through their private communication channel. Admiral, the Constellation is holding position at the entry corridor. Captain Torres reports all systems ready. He is asking for orders. Harker's jaw tightened. Only another human would have noticed the movement. Tell Torres to begin Protocol 7. Silently. No active signatures. Vasquez's breath caught in her throat. Protocol 7 was not a defensive measure. In the chamber, High Arbiter Thessalon raised its appendage again to render judgment. The Sovereignty has heard sufficient testimony. The species designation human is hereby classified as precognizant fauna, unworthy of sovereign status. General Vornik, you may dispatch your forces at your convenience. This matter is concluded. High Arbiter. Harker's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Several species physically recoiled from the sound. It was not loud. It was not aggressive. It carried something far more dangerous. Absolute certainty. Before you render judgment, I am required by my government to inform you of one detail our initial submission left out. He clasped his hands behind his back. The 3 vessels you observed crossing into sovereignty space were not our fleet. The murmuring ceased entirely. They were our diplomatic convoy. Thessalon's light pattern stuttered. Explain yourself. High Arbiter, humanity has maintained its interstellar fleet in silent running for the past 11 years. We were waiting to determine whether the rumors of galactic civilization were accurate, and if so, whether that civilization would prove to be reasonable. Harker smiled. The expression showed his teeth. We have now determined that it is not. He raised his hand, and the display behind him shifted. The image of 3 small ships vanished. In its place, emerging from the darkness, between stars like monsters rising from the deep ocean, came the true human fleet, the UES Nemesis. 2 kilometers of angular, brutal engineering. No graceful curves. No artistic design. Just armor, weapons, and engines built by a species that had spent its entire existence at war with itself. And beside it, another ship. And another. And 1,700 more. General Vornik's living armor rippled in a way no translator could interpret. Admiral Harker turned to face the assembly. The human species formally withdraws its petition for recognition. Effective immediately. We instead submit a declaration of war against the galactic sovereignty and all member species who do not formally withdraw within the next standard rotation. Silence filled the chamber. Absolute silence. Then James Harker delivered the words that would echo across 40,000 years of galactic history. You had one chance to treat us as equals. You chose ridicule instead. Now you will learn why humanity never asks twice. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates scattered in every direction. Security forces mobilized. But the 4 humans stood perfectly still, and somehow that stillness was more terrifying than any display of force. High Arbiter, Thessalon demanded clarification on the fleet composition. It received a data packet that took 17 minutes to process. 1,800 warships, 400 support vessels, a combined crew of 2.3 million personnel, all running silent in the void between systems, waiting for this exact moment. But it was the weapon specifications that caused the true panic. Humanity had not developed elegant energy weapons. They had instead perfected what they called relativistic kill vehicles. Tungsten rods accelerated to 92% of light speed, carrying kinetic energy equivalent to small stellar events. They had developed warheads that collapsed local spacetime into temporary black holes. They had engineered biological weapons, so, precisely targeted, they could eliminate a single species, while, leaving all others unharmed, they had spent 2 centuries preparing for a war no one had declared. Yet when General Vornik demanded to know how such preparations were possible, Admiral Harker answered with 6 words that would haunt the sovereignty for generations. We never stopped fighting each other. As the diplomatic team prepared to withdraw, a young sovereignty intelligence officer named Mirith made a devastating discovery in the human data streams. The fleet they had displayed was also not complete. There were more ships, many more, and they were already moving toward sovereignty space. The war had not just been declared. It had already begun. 40 hours after the declaration, the galactic networks had transformed the human announcement into entertainment. Across 17,000 worlds, a clip of Admiral Harker's statement played on repeat. Editors added comedic sound effects and mocking commentary. The Veldrothi Comedy Collective produced a satirical drama showing clumsy humans tripping over their own primitive vessels. The HFY War Ministry released an official statement assuring all citizens that the situation would be corrected within a quarter cycle. Nothing to worry about. Just another young species that needed to learn its place. Only a handful of analysts noticed the discrepancies in the data. Intelligence. Coordinator Mirith of the Sovereignty's Strategic Assessment Division sat in her darkened office aboard Observation Station 12. She stared at data streams that made no logical sense. The human fleet Admiral Harker had revealed was impressive for a young species, but it was still numerically inferior to even a single HFY battle group. The declaration of war should have been suicide. And yet, computer, analyze human vessel movement patterns over the past 11 years. Cross-reference with unexplained sensor anomalies in all border sectors. The result took 8 seconds. An eternity for quantum processing systems. 147,000 anomalies. Flagged. Mirith's pale complexion went completely white. That was not possible. The Sovereignty's detection grid was the most sophisticated surveillance system in galactic history. Nothing moved through monitored space without being registered, unless it was specifically designed to avoid registration. She opened a priority channel to High Command. This is Coordinator Mirith, with an urgent revision to the human threat assessment. I believe we have significantly underestimated their capabilities, and we need to immediately reconsider our tactical approach before we engage in any military action against their forces. The channel died. Mid-transmission dot across the station, lights flickered. Gravity generators stuttered. And in the viewport behind her, something massive blotted out the stars. The U.S. Achilles had arrived. Captain Theodore Blake stood on the command deck of the Achilles, watching Observation Station 12 grow larger in the tactical display. His crew moved with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire careers. No wasted motion. No unnecessary communication. Just focus. Status on the station's defense grid? Powering up now, Captain. They are launching interceptors. 43 HFY light fighters. Blake nodded slowly. Let them get close. I want them to see what we can do. The fighters swarmed toward the Achilles like silver insects against the black void. They were fast and maneuverable. Their plasma-based weapon systems could slag conventional armor in seconds. They represented the cutting edge of sovereignty military technology. The Achilles had no conventional armor. Activate the veil. The ship's hull rippled like water. And suddenly, the Achilles was no longer there. At least not according to any sensor system in the known galaxy. The fighters' targeting solutions went completely haywire. They fired blindly, their plasma bolts passing through empty space where a 2-kilometer warship had been a moment before. From invisibility, the Achilles spoke with its primary weapon, a single magnetically accelerated tungsten round. Traveling at 87% of light velocity. It struck the lead fighter formation before their pilots could even process the sensor data. The kinetic impact converted 17 fighters into expanding clouds of plasma and debris. The shock wave destabilized the others, sending them spinning out of control. In 4.7 seconds, the engagement was over. Captain Blake keyed the fleet channel. All stations, this is Achilles. First blood is ours. Proceed to Phase 2. Across Sovereignty space, similar scenes played out simultaneously. Patrol stations went silent. Communication relays exploded into fragments. Supply depots vanished in artificial singularities that collapsed as quickly as they formed. The humans struck everywhere at once, hitting targets that seemed random, but were actually carefully selected to blind and confuse the Sovereignty's command structure. And still, the Sovereignty's leadership dismissed the reports as exaggeration. General Vornak reviewed the initial casualty figures from his command fortress. He actually laughed at what he saw. 400 personnel lost? We lose more than that in training accidents. The humans are expending their resources on meaningless symbolic strikes. They accomplish nothing but delay their own extinction. His aide shifted uncomfortably. General, the Strategic Assessment Division is requesting an audience. Coordinator Mirith has evidence that suggests we may be underestimating the human strategic capabilities in ways that could prove catastrophic for our initial response forces. Mirith is an analyst, not a warrior. She sees threats in empty data. Vornak waved his massive hand dismissively. Prepare the third assault fleet. We will crush this rebellion within a quarter cycle and make an example of their homeworld. Earth, they call it. Soon it will be a monument to the cost of defying the sovereignty. On Earth, in the underground complex designated Unity Command, the true scope of humanity's plan took shape on holographic displays that filled an entire cavern. Fleet Admiral Victoria Sterling stood before the strategic projection, surrounded by the unified command structure of 73 nation-states. 200 years of preparation had led to this moment. 200 years of secret development, hidden construction, and deliberate misdirection. Every political disagreement, every border conflict, every public display of division had been carefully managed to make humanity appear exactly as divided and weak as possible. Report from the Achilles. Observation Station 12 neutralized. Coordinator Mirith was extracted per your orders. She is currently in transit to a secure facility. Sterling nodded with satisfaction. Mirith was too intelligent to waste. The Sovereignty would dismiss her warnings. Humanity would not. And the Veshan Third Assault Fleet? Mobilizing exactly as our models predicted. They are taking the bait, Admiral. The plan was elegant in its brutality. The Sovereignty had grown complacent across 40 millennia of unchallenged dominance. They fought wars with overwhelming force and predictable patterns. They could not conceive of a species that would plan a conflict decades in advance, seeding false intelligence, deliberately appearing weak, and positioning assets with surgical precision long before any hostilities began. Admiral Sterling pulled up the galactic map. Red dots indicated Sovereignty forces. Blue dots showed human positions. And green dots marked something else entirely. Assets that neither side had accounted for yet. The Third Fleet will transit through the Vexor Corridor in approximately 18 hours. That is where we remind them why humans developed the concept of the ambush. She turned to face the assembled commanders from every major nation on Earth. Humanity has been mocked, dismissed, and sentenced to extinction by creatures who looked at our ships and saw primitives. They do not see what made us. We did not evolve in paradise. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We developed intelligence to survive predators, diseases, ice ages, and each other. We invented war before we invented writing. Her voice hardened with conviction. The Sovereignty thinks kinetic weapons are primitive because they use elegant energy systems. They have forgotten what kinetic energy actually means when wielded by a species that has perfected Violence across 100,000 years of constant conflict. She pointed to the Vexor corridor on the display. In 18 hours, we will remind them. As forces positioned for the coming ambush, a transmission arrived from an unexpected source. A species within the sovereignty wanted to defect, but the message carried a warning that made even Sterling pause. The High Arbiter was not merely a judge. Desolan was something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And if the humans pushed too far, they would wake something that had slept for millennia. Something that had destroyed civilizations. Before humanity's ancestors had climbed down from the trees, the first battle was about to begin. But it would not be the last. The Veshan Third Assault Fleet numbered 300 warships, each one a masterwork of gravitational engineering and plasma weaponry. General Vornak himself commanded from the flagship Eternal Dominance, a vessel whose hull had been grown over 8 centuries from living metal that could heal damage faster than most weapons could inflict it. They entered the Vexor corridor in standard transit formation. Sensors swept the asteroid field that lined the narrow passage between star systems. The humans had surely placed defenses here. The corridor was the fastest route to Earth. Any competent military commander would recognize its strategic importance. They found nothing. Tactical assessment? Vornik demanded from his command throne. Clear, General. No enemy signatures. No anomalous readings. The corridor is completely undefended. Vornik's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The humans are fools. They declared war without securing the most obvious approach to their homeworld. Increase speed to maximum. We will reach Earth before their pathetic fleet can reposition. The fleet accelerated, and the corridor closed behind them. Captain Blake watched from the Achilles as the trap engaged. 1,700 human vessels had been hiding in the asteroid field for weeks, running cold, their signatures buried beneath the natural radiation of the ancient rocks. Crews had survived on minimal life support. They had eaten cold rations and slept in shifts. They had waited in darkness and silence for this exact moment. As the Veshan fleet committed fully to the corridor, the human ships powered up simultaneously. The darkness between the asteroids suddenly blazed with engine signatures. All vessels, weapons free. The first volley was not energy weapons or missiles. It was simply rocks. Asteroids that had been fitted with crude chemical thrusters and accelerated to relativistic velocities over the past 3 weeks. The Veshans had never developed point defense systems capable of tracking such primitive projectiles. Their shields were designed for plasma and gravitational weapons, not mass-moving at 90% of light speed. The first 60 ships died without understanding what had killed them. Massive W. Our ships simply ceased to exist as kinetic energy, converted matter into expanding spheres of superheated debris. General Vornik screamed for counterfire. But there was nothing to target. The human ships had gone dark again, invisible against the background radiation of the asteroid field. His fleet was firing blindly, while relativistic death rained from every direction. Focus shields forward. We pushed through to open space. It was the correct tactical decision. It was also exactly what the humans had predicted. As the surviving Veshan vessels concentrated their defenses at the front of the formation, the human ships attacking from the rear intensified their bombardment. The fleet's rearguard crumbled under the sustained assault. The flagship Eternal Dominance took 7 direct impacts that overwhelmed its regenerative hull. Warning lights cascaded across every system aboard. And then the humans did something no species in galactic history had ever attempted against the young. The SSINS. A boarded. Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reyes led the first assault team through the breach in the Veshan flagship's hull. Her powered armor was crude by galactic standards. Thick plating, servo-assisted joints, integrated life support. but it was designed for one specific purpose: close quarters combat against physically superior opponents. The Veshans who met them were terrifying. 3 meters tall, encased in living armor that moved with their bodies. They wielded plasma projectors that could vaporize unprotected humans in less than a second. They had never fought humans before. Rias. Squad moved with coordinated precision that humanity had developed. Across 10,000 years of ground warfare, they used cover. They provided overlapping fire. They threw grenades that released targeted electromagnetic pulses to disable the living armor's neural interfaces. When the plasma projectors proved too dangerous for direct engagement, they collapsed corridors and fought in confined spaces with the Veshans. Size became a disadvantage instead of an asset. The aliens fought with raw power and technological superiority. There, humans fought with cunning, adaptation, and complete disregard for what should have been possible. In 17 minutes, Lieutenant Commander Reyes stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance. Her weapon was pointed at General Vornak's central processing node, the only part of his armored form that was truly vulnerable. "General," she said through external speakers, "you are hereby taken into custody by the United Earth Forces. Your fleet has been destroyed. Your war is over." Vornak stared at her with compound eyes that had witnessed 3,000 years of conquest. "You cannot win. You have destroyed one fleet. The sovereignty commands millions of vessels, thousands of species. You are nothing." Reyes smiled behind her visor. "We are not trying to win, General. We are trying to send a message." She activated her communication unit. "Unity command, package is secure. Broadcast when ready." Across the galaxy, every communication network simultaneously received the same transmission. It could not be blocked, jammed, or filtered. Human specialists had spent decades developing the infiltration protocols. The video showed General Vornak, the most feared military commander in sovereignty history, kneeling before a human soldier half his size. Behind him lay the wreckage of his flagship. Around him were the bodies of his elite guard. Admiral Sterling's voice accompanied the images in every language the sovereignty used. "This message is addressed to all species of the galactic sovereignty. 40 hours ago, your leadership sentenced humanity to extinction. They dismissed our capabilities. They mocked our technology. They assumed that because our ships were small and our weapons primitive, we posed no threat. They were wrong." In the Grand Chamber, High Arbiter Thessalon received the broadcast in silence. The delegates who remained were no longer laughing. Fear had replaced mockery in every neural signature the chamber systems could detect. A senior counselor approached carefully. "High Arbiter, perhaps we should consider the human terms. The losses, while unfortunate, are sustainable. Further conflict may prove more costly than anticipated." No. Thessalon's light threads had begun to pulse in patterns no living being in the chamber had ever witnessed. Ancient patterns. Primal patterns. Patterns that predated the sovereignty itself. "You do not understand what these creatures are. I have governed this sovereignty for 40,000 cycles. I have seen species rise and fall. I have guided evolution and corrected aberrations. But in all that time, I have encountered only 3 species with this particular combination of traits: intelligence without contentment, ambition without limit, violence without hesitation. The patterns intensified until they hurt to observe directly. The first such species destroyed itself before achieving interstellar travel. The second was neutralized by my predecessors." Thessalon paused. "The third became me." The chamber fell into absolute silence. "I am not merely a judge, counselor. I am a weapon. The last survivor of a species so dangerous that the original sovereignty sacrificed 17 star systems to contain us. They believed they had succeeded. They incorporated me into their governance structure as a safeguard against future threats. Thessalon rose from the Arbiter's platform. Its form expanded, unfolded, revealed geometries that should not exist within normal spacetime. Light bent around it. Reality itself seemed to recoil. They were right to fear what I was. And they were right to believe that only something like me could stop something like the humans. Inform the humans their deadline is rejected. Inform them that judgment has been passed. And inform them that the Arbiter is coming, personally. The defecting species had tried to warn humanity. Thessalon was not merely ancient. It was the last survivor of a galactic war that had ended 40,000 years ago. A war that had left 3 galaxies completely sterile. Every living thing in them erased from existence. And humanity had just convinced it to stop pretending to be civilized. Admiral Victoria. Sterling read the intelligence report 3 times before she trusted herself to. Speak, you are telling me that the creature running there, Judiciary, is actually a survivor of a species that committed genocide on a galactic scale? The holographic image of the defector flickered with stress patterns. Tessix was a Valorian diplomat who had chosen humanity over extinction. Her species had been conquered by the sovereignty 3,000 years ago. They remembered what true war looked like. Not genocide, Admiral. Extinction. Multiple extinctions. Tessalon's species did not simply kill their enemies. They unmade them. Retroactive erasure. Temporal elimination. Species that should have existed for billions of years simply never did. The original sovereignty found Tessalon drifting alone in the void between galaxies. The last of its kind. They made a bargain. Serve as a deterrent and be allowed to exist. Sterling's jaw tightened. And in 40,000 years, no one tested that deterrent? Why would they? The sovereignty's power was absolute. No species developed far enough to pose a genuine threat. Tessix paused. Until you? The Admiral turned to her tactical staff, gathered in Unity Command. Options? General Thomas Rodriguez, commander of Earth's ground forces, spoke first. If this intelligence is accurate, conventional warfare is insufficient. We need to understand Tessalon's capabilities before we can develop any counter-strategy. The Valorians have partial records, Tessix offered. Tessalon's species manipulated fundamental forces, gravity, time, causality itself. They could make events unhappen. They could delete possibilities from the universe before those possibilities ever occurred. Then how were they stopped? Tessix hesitated before answering. They were not stopped, Admiral. They stopped themselves. Some form of internal conflict. Civil war. Religious schism. The records are unclear. But Tessalon is the only survivor. And it has been restrained for millennia. Your declaration of war appears to have removed that restraint. Sterling closed her eyes. When she opened them, her expression had hardened into something her officers recognized immediately. The look of a commander who had accepted that some costs could not be avoided. Then we need to end this before Tessalon fully activates. All forces, new priority. Locate and neutralize the High Arbiter. And find out how its species killed each other. If they found a way, so can we. The human fleet regrouped at the marker threshold, a region of space where gravitational anomalies created natural choke points. If Tessalon was coming, it would come through here. Captain Blake commanded the forward screening force from the Achilles. His fleet of 300 vessels spread across the threshold, with weapons charged and every crew member at combat stations. They had won their first battle. They had captured General Vornek. They had proven that humanity could fight Dot. Now they faced something that had destroyed entire galaxies. The first sign was the stars going out. Not all at once. A gradual dimming, as if something vast was passing between the fleet and the galactic core, absorbing light rather than blocking it. Contact, the sensor officer reported. Her voice was strained with barely controlled fear. Single signature. Bearing everywhere. It is everywhere. The display flickered wildly. Where moments before there had been empty space, something now existed that defied the concept of shape. It was darkness given form. Geometry twisted into configurations that made human eyes ache and human minds recoil. And at its center, still recognizable as the light thread being from the judgment chamber, doubly. As Thessalon, transformed into something that had no name in any human language. All vessels. The Arbiter's voice resonated through every communication frequency, every neural implant, every molecule of air in every ship. You have defied the sovereignty. You have rejected judgment. Now you will experience correction. Captain Blake keyed the fleet channel with steady hands. All ships weapons free. Give it everything we have. 300 human vessels opened fire simultaneously. Relativistic rounds. Gravitational warheads. Singularity torpedoes. The combined firepower could have shattered planets. Collapsed stars. Rewritten the geography of entire solar systems. It vanished into Thessalon without any visible effect. It is as I said. The Arbiter's voice contained something that might have been sadness. Your weapons are primitive. Your strategies are transparent. Your species is flawed. The darkness began to expand, reaching toward the nearest human vessels like tentacles of absolute void. Now witness true power. The destroyer UEs, defiant, touched the edge of the darkness and ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, simply removed from the universe. The crew, the ship, the history of its construction, all of it gone as if it had never been. Only the confused sensor logs of other vessels remained as evidence that something had once occupied that position in formation. Blake watched 3 more ships vanish in the same way. His mind rebelled against the impossibility, but his training held firm. All ships, fall back to rally point 7. We cannot win this engagement. Captain, the threshold is closing. It is warping space behind us. We are trapped. Blake looked at the tactical display. Thessalon was not merely attacking. It was containing them, playing with them, demonstrating the complete hopelessness of resistance. And then he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. A single ship was moving toward Thessalon rather than away. The U-East Prometheus. Its transponder identified it as a scientific vessel, minimally armed, designed for research rather than combat. Prometheus, what are you doing? Fall back immediately. The response came not from the ship's captain, but from someone Blake had not expected. Captain Blake, this is Admiral Sterling. I am aboard the Prometheus. Maintain your retreat and protect the fleet. Admiral? With respect, that vessel has no offensive capability. You are flying into certain death. No, Captain. Sterling's voice was calm, almost peaceful. I am flying into a negotiation. Victoria Sterling stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as it approached the entity that had casually erased 4 of her warships from existence. Around her, a skeleton crew of volunteers operated essential systems. The rest of the ship had been converted into a single massive device, something human scientists had developed in secret for decades, based on theoretical physics that most of the galaxy considered impossible. Thessalon, she broadcast on all frequencies. I request parley. The expansion of darkness paused. For a moment, the terrible pressure on the surrounding fleet eased. Parley? Amusement colored the Arbiter's resonance. You have nothing to offer. Your fleet is trapped. Your species is marked for correction. What could you possibly say that would interest me? I know what killed your species. Silence. Absolute ringing silence that seemed to stretch across dimensions themselves. Explain. Sterling nodded to her science officer. The Prometheus began transmitting data, research compiled from 1,000 sources, intelligence gathered from defecting species, theoretical models constructed by humanity's greatest minds across 2 centuries of preparation. Your species did not die in a war with external enemies, Tessalon. You died because you became too powerful. You could manipulate causality, rewrite history, delete events from existence. But that power came with a cost. Every time you changed something, you created paradoxes, contradictions, wounds in the fabric of reality itself. Sterling's voice hardened with conviction. Your civil war was not about politics or religion. It was about survival. Half your species realized that your continued existence was tearing the universe apart. They sacrificed themselves to stop the damage. You survived because you were the most conservative, the most restrained, the least willing to use your full capabilities. The darkness around the Prometheus rippled like disturbed water. And now you have been awake for 40 millennia, bound by a promise to limit yourself, watching lesser species fumble through existence while you play at being civilized. We threatened your perfect order, so you dropped the pretense. You showed us what you really are. Sterling leaned forward. But you know the truth. You know that every time you erase one of our ships, you damage the same fabric your ancestors nearly destroyed. You know that if you truly unleash yourself against humanity, you risk waking the same wounds that killed your kind. You know nothing, Tessalon rumbled, but the confidence was gone from its voice. I am controlled, limited. I will not cause harm to the fabric of reality. I have restrained myself for 40,000 years. You have already started. The 4 ships you erased? I can feel the scars from here. My science officer can measure them. Tiny fractures in local causality, spreading outward like cracks in ice. Sterling smiled coldly. You built yourself a cage, Tessalon. 40,000 years of restraint. And a single human fleet made you forget why you needed it. The darkness contracted, reformed into something closer to the Arbiter's original form. When it spoke again, the cosmic resonance was gone, replaced by something almost vulnerable. What do you want? Peace, recognition, the same thing we wanted from the beginning. As Tessalon considered her words, the rest of the Sovereignty's forces arrived at the marker threshold. Thousands of ships from dozens of species. And among them, hidden in plain sight, were the seeds of something neither Tessalon nor Sterling had anticipated. A rebellion, the arrival of the Sovereignty's combined fleet transformed the marker threshold into the most heavily militarized region of space in galactic history. 12,000 vessels from 47 species formed a massive hemisphere of firepower around the trapped human fleet. Each ship awaited the order to open fire and end the human threat forever. At the center of this potential apocalypse, the Prometheus hung motionless, a tiny scientific vessel facing an entity that could unmake reality itself. And Admiral Victoria Sterling waited for an answer. You are bluffing, Tessalon said finally. Your species values self-preservation above all else. You would not risk universal destruction to win a war. Sterling shook her head slowly. You have spent 40,000 years watching civilizations from above, Tessalon. You have forgotten what it means to have something worth dying for. Humanity did not survive this long by being careful. We survived by being willing to sacrifice everything when nothing else would work. She gestured at the fleet surrounding them. Look at your sovereignty. 40 millennia of peace. And what have they built? Stagnation, complacency, an empire so convinced of its own superiority that it sentenced a new species to death for the crime of existing. And you believe you can do better? I believe we can do different. Evolution requires struggle. Growth requires challenge. Your sovereignty eliminated both. Your species have become fossils while still breathing. Sterling's voice softened slightly. You asked what we want. Here is the full answer. We want competition, partnership, the right to rise or fall based on our own merits, not the judgments of beings who forgot what it means to strive. Tesselin's form rippled. For the first time since its transformation, something like genuine emotion crossed its alien features. You remind me of them, it said quietly. My people, before the end. That same fire, that same terrible certainty. A long pause followed. We thought we could control the universe. We thought power was the answer to everything. We were wrong. Then let us prove we can be right. Or let us fail trying. Either way, it will be our choice. Before Tesselon could respond, the Sovereignty fleet erupted into chaos. It began with the Valorian contingent. 30 vessels suddenly broke formation and positioned themselves between the human fleet and the Theshan battle groups. Their commander, Admiral Corvith, broadcast on all frequencies. The Valorian Republic hereby withdraws from the Galactic Sovereignty. For 3,000 years, we served as subjects of an empire that promised protection and delivered only contempt. Today, we witness that empire sentence an entire species to extinction for daring to exist. We will not be party to this crime. No more. Within seconds, other ships joined them. The Kellex Collective, the Moldravian Free States, the Tessix Commonwealth, species that had been conquered, subjugated, and incorporated into the sovereignty over millennia. All of them moving to shield the human fleet. General Visorak, commanding the Sovereignty Response Force, screamed for order. All loyal vessels opened fire. These traitors will burn alongside the humans. Execute them all. The first plasma bolts flew across the void. And humanity entered its second war of the day. Captain Blake watched in amazement as Valorian ships absorbed fire that had been meant for his fleet. These aliens had never met a human before today, yet they were willing to die alongside them. All vessels, support our new allies. Target the Vishan command ships. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Sovereignty loyalists against sovereignty rebels. Humanity fighting alongside species they had never met. All while an ancient entity hovered at the center of the conflict, watching and waiting. The UES Achilles dueled with 3 Vishan cruisers simultaneously. Its stealth systems flickered as it struck from unexpected angles. Relativistic rounds punched through armor designed to withstand plasma weapons. The cruisers had no defense against kinetic impacts at near-light speeds. Throughout the battle, the Prometheus remained still. Its strange device hung with power that sensors could not properly measure. A sword hanging over reality itself. And Admiral Sterling kept talking. Tesselin, look at what is happening. Your sovereignty is tearing itself apart. Not because of us, because it was already broken. We just showed them it was possible to resist. You have shown them chaos, Tesselin responded. War, death, this is your gift to the galaxy? No, this is their gift to themselves. The choice to fight for what they believe in, even against impossible odds. That is what you took from them for 40,000 years. That is what we are giving back. The battle raged across the threshold. But gradually, the tide began to turn. The rebel forces were smaller, but they fought with desperate conviction. The loyalists, conditioned by millennia of easy victories, faltered against genuine resistance. They had forgotten how to fight enemies who were not afraid. And through it all, Tesselin watched, considered, remembered. The decisive moment came when the Theshan flagship targeted the Prometheus directly. General Visorak had lost control of the larger battle. He had decided to eliminate the human leadership at any cost. Gravitational lens powerful enough to crack. Planets focused on Sterling's vessel and Tesselon. Moved. The beam that would have destroyed the Prometheus simply stopped. Frozen in space by an entity that could rewrite the laws of physics. Around it, the battle ground to a halt as every vessel, rebel and loyalist alike, witnessed the Arbiter intervene. Directly, Enough, Tesselin's voice resonated through the fabric of spacetime itself. I have witnessed 40,000 years of stagnation, 40,000 years of watching species plateau, content with mediocrity, protected from the struggle that defines evolution. I told myself this was peace, stability, necessary order. The frozen, gravitational beam dissolved into nothing. I was wrong. Tesselin turned to face the assembled fleets, thousands of vessels from dozens of species, all watching in terrified awe as the most powerful being in the galaxy rendered judgment not on humanity, but on itself. The galactic sovereignty as IT exists is hereby dissolved. A new order will be established, one built not on subjugation, but on cooperation, not on judgment, but on negotiation, not on the elimination of threats, but on the integration of perspectives. The Arbiter's gaze fixed on Sterling. Humanity will be recognized as a sovereign power, equal to any other in this galaxy. More than that, they will be architects of what comes next, not because they defeated US with weapons, but because they reminded US what we had forgotten, that growth requires challenge. Challenge requires the freedom to choose. Sterling released a breath she had not realized she was holding. And what about you, Tesselin? What happens to the Arbiter? The ancient being was silent for a long moment before responding. I will return to watching, but this time I will watch too. Learn not to judge. Your species has shown me that even the oldest of us can forget fundamental truths. Perhaps that is the greatest gift you could offer. Reminder that wisdom is not the same as understanding, and age is not the same as growth. 1 year later, the Treaty of Threshold was signed on the anniversary of humanity's declaration of war. Representatives from 93 species gathered aboard a neutral station constructed specifically for the occasion, a joint project between Earth's engineers and Valorian architects, designed to symbolize the new alliance that had emerged from the ashes of the old order. Admiral Victoria Sterling, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Cooperative, stood before the assembled delegates. Behind her, a vast viewport showed the stars of a galaxy forever changed by a species that had refused to accept ridicule. 1 year ago, humanity stood before the old sovereignty's judgment chamber. We were told that we were nothing, primitive, irrelevant, a species to be corrected rather than welcomed. She smiled, a genuine smile, free of the cold calculation that had defined her during the war. They were wrong about us, but we were wrong about them too. We came prepared for war because we expected enemies. What we found instead were potential friends trapped in a system that denied them the chance to grow. We fought not to conquer, but to liberate, including the sovereignty itself. In the audience, the beings who had once mocked humanity listened with respect. Fear remained. The memories of the marker threshold would not fade quickly. But there was also hope. The galaxy had been shown that change was possible, that even ancient empires could evolve, that the future was not fixed in stone. Humanity offers today the same thing we offered a year ago: partnership, competition, the right to succeed or fail on our own merits. We ask only that you grant us the same respect you would give any other species. No more, no less. She raised a glass of earth wine. The gesture had been explained to the assembled delegates. Many attempted to imitate it with varying degrees of success. To the future, may we build it together, across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds that had never known anything but the sovereignty's stagnant peace, a new era began, sparked by a species that refused to accept ridicule, ignited by a war that became a liberation, and sustained by the most human of qualities, the stubborn, defiant, unquenchable refusal to be diminished. Humanity had arrived among the stars, not as subjects, not as threats, but as equals, and the galaxy would never be the same again.